It starts on a quiet morning in a small American town where nothing much ever happens. At least, that's what people like to believe. The kind of place where everyone knows each other's names, where lawns are trimmed perfectly, and where the sound of a passing car is enough to make curtains twitch. In the middle of that town sits a modest, slightly worn house at the end of Maple Street. It's not the prettiest house, not the biggest either, but it carries something far more valuable: history. Inside that house lives Mr. Harold Bennett, an 82-year-old widower who has spent over 5 decades under that roof. Every wall, every scratch on the wooden floor, every creak of the staircase tells a story. His late wife planted the roses that still bloom stubbornly in the front yard. His children grew up within those walls, though they've long since moved away. For Harold, this house isn't just property, it's his life. But to the city officials, it's something else entirely. The first letter arrives on a Tuesday. Harold finds it tucked into his mailbox along with the usual bills and flyers. He doesn't think much of it at first, but when he opens it, his hands tremble slightly. The letter is formal, cold, and filled with legal language. It states that his property has been flagged for noncompliance with city housing codes. There are mentions of structural concerns, outdated permits, and failure to meet current residential standards. At the bottom, a warning: failure to resolve these issues within 30 days may result in eviction proceedings. Harold reads it twice, then a third time. None of it makes sense to him. He's lived there for over 50 years. No one has ever complained. No one has ever inspected the house before. Why now? At first, he assumes it's a mistake. He calls the number listed on the letter. After being transferred 3 times and placed on hold for nearly 40 minutes, he finally reaches someone. The voice on the other end is polite but distant. They explain that the city is conducting a neighborhood redevelopment initiative. Certain properties have been selected for review. Harold asks what exactly is wrong with his house. The answer is vague. Multiple code violations, they say. He asks for specifics. "We'll send an inspector." A week later, the inspector shows up. The man barely looks Harold in the eye. He walks around the property with a clipboard, taking notes, snapping pictures. He measures things Harold doesn't understand: distance between railings, height of steps, spacing of windows. At one point, he shakes his head and scribbles something down. Harold follows him around like a shadow, asking questions that never get real answers. By the end of the visit, the inspector simply says, "You'll receive the report soon." And just like that, he leaves. The second letter is worse. It lists over a dozen violations. Some are minor: peeling paint, an old fence leaning slightly to one side, but others feel absurd. The width of the hallway doesn't meet modern standards. The electrical system is outdated. The foundation requires further evaluation. At the bottom is a number that makes Harold's chest tighten. The estimated cost to bring the house up to code is more than he's made in the last 10 years combined. And then the final line: if repairs are not completed within 30 days, the property will be deemed uninhabitable and eviction proceedings will begin. This time, Harold doesn't call. He just sits in his chair, staring at the paper for hours. The news spreads slowly at first. Mrs. Carter from next door notices Harold hasn't been tending to his roses. A few days later, she sees the official notice taped to his front door. Within a week, the entire neighborhood knows something is wrong. People start asking questions. Why Harold? Why now? Then someone notices something else. At the edge of town, a large development sign has gone up. A private company is planning to build luxury apartments and retail spaces. The project promises modern living in a revitalized community. And Maple Street sits right in the middle of that plan. Suddenly, things start to make sense. Or rather, they start to feel wrong. One evening, Mrs. Carter knocks on Harold's door. She brings a casserole, but it's not really about the food. She sits with him at the kitchen table as he explains everything. By the time he finishes, her expression has changed. This isn't just about code violations anymore. This feels personal. The next day, she talks to others. Within days, a small group of neighbors gathers in her living room. They compare notes. Some have received similar letters, warnings, inspections, subtle pressure to sell. But Harold's case is the most extreme. He's lived here longer than any of us, someone says. They can't just throw him out, another adds. But the truth is they can try. And that's exactly what they're doing. A week later, a city notice appears on Harold's lawn. Bright orange, impossible to ignore. Unsafe structure, subject to eviction. That's when something changes. Not just in Harold, but in the entire neighborhood. At first, it's small. A few neighbors show up to help fix the fence. Someone brings paint and starts working on the exterior walls. A retired electrician offers to check the wiring. Another neighbor, who used to work in construction, volunteers to inspect the foundation. What started as concern turns into action. Every day, more people show up. They bring tools, supplies, food, support. Someone creates a group chat. Someone else starts documenting everything, photos, videos, timelines. They begin to realize that this isn't just about one house. It's about a pattern. And patterns can be exposed. One of the younger residents, a college student named Jake, decides to dig deeper. He spends hours online researching the development project. He looks into the company behind it, the permits, the city council approvals. What he finds is troubling. The project was fast-tracked. Zoning laws were adjusted unusually quickly. And several properties in the targeted area, mostly older homes owned by elderly residents, have recently been flagged for violations. Jake shares his findings with the group. Now it's not just suspicion. It's evidence. The next move is bold. They take the story public. A local journalist picks it up first, then a regional news outlet. Soon, clips start circulating online. Videos of neighbors repairing Harold's house, interviews with residents speaking out against the city's actions. Harold, who once avoided attention, suddenly becomes the face of something much bigger. People from outside, the neighborhood, start paying attention. And the city officials, they notice too. At first, they try to stay silent. Then they issue a statement. They claim everything is being done by the book, that the inspections are standard procedure, that the development project is meant to benefit the community. But the more they talk, the less convincing it sounds. Because the neighborhood isn't backing down. They organize a public meeting. Dozens of residents show up. Some bring signs, others bring documents. When city representatives try to explain the situation, they're met with questions, sharp, detailed, impossible to dodge. Why was this house suddenly deemed unsafe after 50 years? Why are elderly homeowners being targeted? Who benefits from these evictions? The room grows tense. For the first time, the officials don't seem in control. Meanwhile, the repairs on Harold's house continue. Day by day, the place transforms. Fresh paint, reinforced structures, updated wiring. It's not perfect, but it's safe, more than safe. And everything is documented. Before and after photos, receipts, professional opinions from volunteers with real experience. They compile it all into a report. Then they submit it. Silence follows. For a few days, nothing happens. Then, without warning, a new letter arrives. Harold opens it with shaking hands again, but this time the feeling is different. Inside, the tone has changed. The city acknowledges the completed repairs. They state that the property now meets minimum safety requirements. The eviction notice is withdrawn. Just like that. After weeks of pressure, fear and uncertainty, it's over. Or at least it should be. But the story doesn't end there. Because what happened to Harold sparks something bigger. Other residents come forward with similar experiences. The media continues to investigate. Questions are raised about the development project, the approval process, and the treatment of vulnerable homeowners. Under growing pressure, the city announces a formal review. And the developers, they go quiet. Very quiet. Back on Maple Street, life slowly returns to normal. Harold sits on his porch again, watching the sunset. The roses in his yard bloom brighter than ever. Neighbors still stop by, sometimes to check on him, sometimes just to talk. But now there's something different in the air. A sense of unity, of awareness, of strength. Because what happened wasn't just about saving a house. It was about proving something. That even when the system feels too big, too powerful, people coming together can still make a difference. And for Harold Bennett, that difference means everything. Because he's still home,